So, and of course, part of all this tendency to listen to other people's opinions means you're taking advice from people who've got the same problems you have. They have opinions on how to solve it, but they actually haven't solved it yet. And what I lost, this kind of conformity, buying into this kind of widespread conformity, it generally leads to people being what we call busy fools.
Mm.
They're very active in talking, for instance, on social media, LinkedIn. They are very active in talking about what they're doing, talking about often themselves, which is fucking anti-sales 101. And the last thing anyone gives a shit about is you. But they buy into this whole thing, and they will spend 3-4 hours a day just talking about their business. So and the way they look at it, again, this is their own bias, their own cognitive bias. They're busy. They're working. That they are doing stuff connected with their business. It's stuff that everyone else is telling them builds business. You got all these people saying how effective social media marketing is, yet the same ones saying it's not working for them. Why not? I'll just keep doing more of it. And they keep doing more of it because that's what everyone's telling them to do. Well, they are busy fools. They are not thinking, what's actually going to move this needle, regardless of what people will say or think of me. Because a lot of these people, they would benefit, for instance, mightily, massively, from spending 1 hour a day on cold outreach, whether it's cold calling, direct mail, cold emails. But they won't do it. Sometimes not even because they don't want to, but because they're afraid of what other people might say if they get found out. Hey, guys, Google does direct mail. Hello?
It's social media is easy because everyone kind of understands it as well. I genuinely think rather than say spending 3-4 hours a day on social media, you'd be far better off taking one of those hours and sit there and do nothing and just feel how painful that is, because that's essentially what you're doing on social media. You're sitting there and doing nothing. At least this time you'll be able to feel how you feel some frustration, and then you'll be able to use that frustration, that anger, into doing something a little bit more fruitful. Because that's
fruitful.
I'm ignoring that.
I nearly got
spotted a mile off. No, spotted a mile off. Because that's essentially what you're doing. There's no argument that social media can win you clients, especially if you do it the way we teach our clients to do it. We're not arguing that. But John, how many minutes a day on social media do you spend?
Me?
Yeah, how many minutes a day?
What are we classing as social media? Do we treat WhatsApp as social media?
No.
Okay. So social media, I probably spend email. Do we count email?
No, I'm not counting that.
Okay.
LinkedIn, Twitter, Reddit, Facebook.
Oh, on average then, less than 10 minutes a day.
Less than 10 minutes a day.
And that's an average. I mean, I will go weeks, months without logging into anything whatsoever. I've been on LinkedIn more recently because I'm linking it to our cold outreach. Yeah. And I'm looking at how a couple of things are working. So I've got a genuine reason. And once I'm on there, I take 5 minutes to indulge myself in looking at the newsfeed and reminding myself how fucking awful it is. And it is. Mm-hmm. But I mean, I would say since June, since I just logged out of everything, my average a day is probably less than a minute.
Yeah.
I mean, my screen time, I'm actually quite happy to do this. I'm going to post my screen time for people to see, and they will see how little time and where I spend my time. What is it now? Screen.
So the reason I asked about how many minutes on average you spend on social media is because I too spend probably less than a minute on average on social media a day. Yet we still make sales from it.
Yeah.
So don't tell me that you have to spend 3-4 hours a day on social media to make sales. It's bollocks, and there's far better ways of doing it, flat out, and we do it in a very different way compared to most people. So yeah, take an hour, just sit there, feel your pain, feel your frustration, rather than sitting there and telling yourself that you're working, because you're engaging with people and you're building relationships that might be fruitful in the future. I don't like that word, might. Do something with a bit more certainty.
Today, for instance, Reuters, 14 minutes. WhatsApp, 4 minutes. Calculator, 1 minute. Practice Better, it's the thing I use to communicate with my doctor, 1 minute. SoundCloud, 1 minute. Sheets, 47 seconds. My Steps app, 10 seconds. This is today. Starting to get the picture, guys and girls. So the most amount of time I spend on anything is 14 minutes on Reuters, which is the news app, and 4 minutes on WhatsApp. And yeah, it's massive 80-20. No time whatsoever on social media.
As it should be.
As it should
be. Worst thing you can do, especially, the worst thing you can do is just fill your day with crap and thinking you're doing something.
It's conflating and confusing activity with achievement, isn't it? And if you think about it, peeps, the reason this works, or the reason this happens, is, as we've said before, it's all about dopamine. You get the same dopamine rush from being fruitful busy as pointless busy. If your perspective on it is that you're achieving something, if your belief is this is good, this is a good thing to be doing, that activity, regardless of its objective merits, will get you feeling good. That's a real fucking danger.
Very dangerous. But most people won't care.
No.
Just in the same way we're not for everyone. Embracing and taking control of your own life isn't for everyone. Some people are made to just wander through, controlled by their dopamine receptors, jumping from one thing to another, context switching often, so they're always going wide, but remaining shallow and never deep.
To be fair, I think we are probably all controlled ultimately by our dopamine receptors. But I think
to an extent.
I think to a very large extent, because
I think some people more than others.
I would disagree with that because
go on.
I would disagree with it because I think it comes down to self-awareness of it. Because are you suggesting that somebody who gets the short-term dopamine hit of Instagram doom scrolling is more driven by their dopamine than someone who's got a long-term goal and gets dopamine satisfaction from doing that? I would disagree. I would say it's the difference between them both is their awareness of what's happening.
One's a junkie because the spikes are far higher.
You sure about that?
Yeah, the spikes are far higher.
No, are you sure that they're junkies?
So what, dopamine junkies? Yeah, absolutely. If you're spending, the average session on TikTok, I believe, is close to an hour.
Ooh.
I classify that as a junkie. And the spikes they get from that constant context switching, being showed stresses and relaxers, everything from the most interesting video about your favorite habits to big booty meddling Colombian girls.
I'm not denying that they're very much driven. My point is, I'm not sure that people who have a more thoughtful approach to their success and what they want out of life, I don't believe they're any less dopamine driven. I think it's just, look at it this way. Let's use the analogy. There's the junk food diet when you're addicted. Well, you're not addicted, but you are dependent on sugar and maybe alcohol, and you're stuffing your face every 5 minutes and you're getting fat on junk food. And then there's your sensible diet. You're both driven by the need to eat.
Yes.
Yeah. But you approach it differently.
Mm-hmm.
But ultimately, you have to do the same thing. So I'm not entirely sure. It's an interesting concept and one we can explore, but I'm not entirely sure.
My thinking is, and I haven't thought it through as well as perhaps I should for a conversation like this, is it's almost like chasing the dragon. So the higher the spikes you experience,
the more you need it.
The more you need it, and therefore you crave and chase that dopamine a lot more. But therefore the chasm between their peak and their base is far higher. And when you engage in those activities, your baseline dopamine drops, which is why everyone thinks they've got ADHD nowadays. Because they've created this massive chasm through excessive dopamine frying. So then they're like, oh, I'm ADHD. It's like, fucking slow down, you retard. Can't use that word anymore, but I'm retarded, so therefore I can. Compared to the disciplined man that has far higher baseline, but never let its spikes too far. Of course, they're still controlled by dopamine, but nowhere near to the extent of a junkie.
Well, again, yes, we both agree they're both controlled by dopamine. I would say they're controlled to a similar extent. Um, I guess what the difference. I
One's
guess what I mean. One difference might be that your disciplined man or woman or person or non-binary person, your disciplined man requires less of it
yeah,
because
so
it's a
therefore they're
little bit
more
like
likely.
insulin. My insulin sensitivity is massive. It's off the scale. I need a very tiny amount of insulin to do the job, whereas someone who's obese and subsists on sugar and junk food needs a massive hit of insulin. We both need it, and we both get the same result from it. They just need
Mhm.
more of it and more often. I don't think it would be correct to say it wouldn't make any sense, but to really stretch the analogy, it wouldn't mean that I'm any more or less dependent on insulin. It's just that I can get by with less of it.
Yeah,
Interesting conversation though,
yeah,
because here's
because
the
the
thing:
higher the
would you say
baseline,
we are not driven by the dopamine spikes we get from getting triage calls booked, getting sales calls booked, and making those sales? That drives us. I don't think that's any different from someone scrolling on Instagram, but not subjectively, objectively, massively so, in the sense that we're getting results. They're just busy fools.
I understand exactly what you're saying, and you are spot on. I think the angle I'm more
Always
looking
am,
at
mate.
it from is the higher your baseline level directly correlates with the likelihood of you doing work that you find uncomfortable, that you don't want to do, because you can afford for the baseline level to drop.
Yeah, I'd agree with that.
So that's why I'm saying they're less dependent on it, because if they have to undergo an activity that is going to really bore them to death and is really difficult and is going to require long periods of focus and concentration, the one with the higher baseline and the lower peak is far more likely to get it done, and therefore is less driven. Maybe not using dependent wasn't the right word, because we're all dependent, but they're far less driven by instant gratification, and we all know the power
Bingo.
of delaying
All right.
instant gratification, which is why
Anyway,
we get such a big spike from sales and triage.
and here's the kicker, of course, for everybody: discipline is its own reward.
Yeah,
And it's a learned skill. All these things we're talking about, you could be the worst doom scroller in the world, but you can break the habit if you want to. Um, I was never a huge doom scroller, but I still went cold turkey. I just deleted it all from my phone. And if you don't have the willpower to abstain from these things, then physically remove yourself from it. So delete these things from your phone, log out in your browser, change your password to something you can't possibly remember and type in from memory. So you have to go back into something like Bitwarden to find it, or make it as difficult and inconvenient as
old
possible
school
to log
paper
into these
password
things.
book.
Hey,
An old school paper password
yeah,
book. Do you
yeah,
remember them?
yeah, and keep it in a different room from your office. So if you want to go and log into, say, LinkedIn, you've got to get off your ass, leave the office, go to your bedside cabinet, bring the book down, so it's not open on your desk. Type it in and make sure you take it back. Just make it, what you do is you think, I just can't be fucking bothered. It's not worth it.
Yeah.
So anyway, we need to wrap up, my love.